Hi, right, this is a question about the products of combustion. So it reads, large quantities of methane are used as a fuel. Figure 11 shows a Bunsen burner. Methane can be used as a fuel for the Bunsen burner. It shows a Bunsen burner, which we've all seen. The air hole of the chimney of the Bunsen burner can be opened and closed, which we all know. So the question says, explain. So, explain the effect of opening and closing the air hole of the Bunsen burner on the products of combustion and the harm that using large quantities of methane as a fuel can cause. Okay, so explain the effect of opening and closing the air hole. It's the first part of what we need to answer. And the harm that using large quantities of methane as a fuel can cause. So, right, if we go back to the start, the effect of opening and closing the air hole. So if you remember back to the practical that we've all done, where we're heating the ceramic lids, this is about complete and incomplete combustion. So if we remember with complete combustion, right, our products are going to be carbon dioxide, and water, and for incomplete we've got carbon monoxide. I'll go through some of these in a second. Monoxide, and again you get water, but you can also get just carbon. So I'll put carbon down, but it's often referred to as soot because it's particulate, it's small dark particulates, and depending on what's being combusted, and depends what is given off as a product. So that's what the first part of the question is about. The second part of the question, harm that using large quantities of methane as a fuel can cause. So when we're thinking about that, we're going to be thinking about greenhouse gases, because carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. So greenhouse gases. So large quantities of methane can use. So if you think about what greenhouse gases will lead to, ultimately climate change because of the absorption of incoming radiation. So climate change, we've got from climate change, we'll also have melting polar ice caps, melting ice caps. And if we're looking at a sea level rise, melting polar ice caps, so sea levels rise, sea level rises. Okay, so there's not an awful lot to this question. If we can talk about complete and incomplete combustion, we can talk about some of the impacts. When it talks about effects and explaining the harm, we're going to talk about the issues with carbon monoxide. If you remember back to what we've done on carbon monoxide, so carbon monoxide is called the silent killer, right, because it is odorless, right, and it, I'll say tasteless, but and it's also invisible. You can't see it, so it cannot be seen. Excuse the writing. So silent killer, because what carbon monoxide does is it binds to your red blood cells and it takes the place of oxygen. So essentially, when you're breathing in, the oxygen exchange isn't happening in the alveoli of the lungs as it should, because carbon monoxide is bonded onto your red blood cells. So essentially you have nausea, headaches, vomiting, and then ultimately death. So we'll talk about that when we talk about incomplete, because obviously that also comes under harm. So let's do this question, because I've rabbited on long enough. So if we look at it, so let's start with the closed hole. A closed hole, sorry, pull this back into focus. A closed hole gives incomplete combustion, which produces carbon monoxide. Now from this point onwards, right, I'm just going to write CO because it's monoxide, mono meaning one oxygen, So carbon monoxide produces carbon monoxide, which is odorless and colourless, and is toxic. So although I talked about what carbon monoxide does binding to the red blood cells in your body, you can get away because this question is predominantly about combustion. We're just saying it is toxic. So we've pointed out it is actually not very nice for people. So a open hole, right, produces carbon dioxide, with CO2, so di-2, dioxide, and water. Right. Carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. Right. Which means, so we're going to show we understand what we mean by, which means it absorbs heat energy, and traps it, leading to a warming Earth. This in turn can lead to, back over here, to melting polar ice caps, to melting polar ice caps, and sea level rises. So if we consider this for a moment to the 6-mark question, so go back to our question. Explain the effect of opening and closing the air hole of the Bunsen burner on the process of combustion and methane, and the harm that using large quantities of methane as a fuel can cause. So we've got back, we've got a closed hole goes incomplete combustion, so you've recognised that, so that would give you a mark, which produces carbon monoxide, so you've given one of the products, which is odourless and colourless and is toxic, so you've identified that carbon monoxide is a problem. Open hole produces carbon dioxide and water. Right. You'll notice I haven't expanded on this point because what's then happened, so we've nailed that to go open hole produces, because we're looking at complete combustion, right? And I apologise, I should have put complete combustion in there, sorry. Good job we go over these things again, isn't it? So it's always good to reread your answers. Right, carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, which means it absorbs heat energy. So you've identified the greenhouse gas, you've said what it does as far as physics is concerned. I know this is chemistry. Traps it, leading to a warming Earth. So, right, this in turn can lead to melting polar ice caps and sea level rises. So as far as getting the 6 marks and hitting our 6 points are concerned, we've nailed it. Right, hopefully that all makes sense. And I hope to speak to you soon. Bye.